The top 10 absolutely toughest actors in the entire history of Hollywood. You are not going to believe who actually made this list. Forget about the fake muscles and all those special effects. These men bled, they fought, and they survived actual living hell long before they ever stepped foot on a movie set. Some of them came straight from the war, others from prison, but every single one of them was 100% real. Anthony Quinn was not born amidst bright lights or rolling cameras. No, he was born right in the middle of flying bullets. During the violent Mexican Revolution, while the streets were overflowing with blood and gunpowder, Anthony Quinn came into this world. And from that very day on, life did absolutely nothing but push him back against the ropes. When his family finally escaped to the United States, the American dream was not waiting for them. Instead, utter misery was waiting. He grew up in the rough slums of Los Angeles, a place where just surviving the day was a full-time job. By the time he was just 9 years old, he was already working as a butcher, a bricklayer, and a construction assistant. While other children were out playing games, he was hauling bags of cement that were heavier than his own small body. And when food became scarce, he put on the gloves and stepped into the ring. He didn't do it for glory, he did it because of hunger. He became a professional boxer. There were no stunt doubles, there was no choreography, there were only real hard punches. It was about the sheer will not to go down. Those battles did not just break his nose, they forged his very soul. When he finally made it to the cinema, he didn't need a gym at all. His strength was completely real. On the set of Zorba the Greek, he carried giant logs right on his shoulders, and nobody even asked him to do it. He did it simply because it had to be done. In the Guns of Navarone, he scaled real cliffs at 46 years old. No ropes, no doubles, and without asking the insurance company for permission. But the most amazing thing about Quinn wasn't his physique. It was his duality. He could hit like a raging bull and yet cry like a little child. He could laugh out loud and then a split second later look at you with an intensity that would freeze your blood. Inside his body, two worlds existed: the brutality of hard labor and the sensitivity of a man who has truly loved. He was afraid of nothing, not of showing his strength and not of showing his vulnerability. That was his greatest weapon. While other actors needed rehearsals, Quinn only needed to remember exactly what sweat tasted like. The heavy weight of the logs, the gnawing hunger. Remembering that he was once invisible and then became impossible to ignore. Anthony Quinn wasn't just a man acting out strength. He was raw strength, learning how to speak to a camera. Audie Murphy. Hollywood has known a lot of tough men over the years. Some of them played soldiers. Others pretended to be heroes, but only one actually lived a story so brutal that not even the movies dared to tell it fully. His name was Audie Murphy, and beneath that youthful, peaceful face hid an absolute killing machine. He was barely 17 years old when he faked his age just to enlist. He was skinny short and weighed only 50 kilograms. Nobody placed a bet on him, but 2 years later he would become the single most decorated soldier in the United States. The number is absolutely chilling. He killed more than 240 enemies. He survived explosions, crossfire, and bleeding wounds. He never stopped and he never backed down. The most brutal scene of his entire legend seems like it was ripped straight out of a fiction movie. Standing in front of a burning tank all alone, he held off an attack from an entire company of German soldiers. He used the machine gun from the destroyed tank, fired until he completely ran out of bullets and suffered serious wounds. Even so, he led the counterattack that annihilated the enemy. His prize was the Medal of Honor. His response was just an uncomfortable silence. He never believed he was a hero. When he returned home, fame found him anyway. His face appeared in Life magazine. The studios called him, but nobody believed that this quiet young man, with the face of a high school kid, was the legendary killer that the military reports were talking about. He filmed To Hell and Back, an autobiographical movie, but the producers actually had to soften the facts. They said that nobody would believe what Audie had actually done. It was just too incredible, too brutal. But the war did not end for him. At night, he relived the combat, he screamed, and he slept with a gun. His terrified wife said that it wasn't Audie, it was someone else. He never boasted and he preferred simple roles. But one look on camera was enough to feel it. This man had seen hell and come back. He had killed to survive, and he carried those invisible scars like no one else could. In an industry that is absolutely packed with fake muscles and heroic scripts, Audie Murphy stood out as the only actor they actually had to censor because he was simply too brave for the screen. He didn't need to act at all. The war had already transformed him into a living myth, proving that sometimes the most innocent-looking face is actually the most dangerous one of all. James Cagney stood no taller than 165. He didn't possess exaggerated muscles, and he certainly didn't have a thunderous voice to command the room. But the moment he stepped into a scene, nobody dared to breathe because there was something in his body, something intense burning in his gaze. In his sheer precision, he communicated exactly what many others screamed without success. "You do not mess with me." He was born on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in a rough neighborhood, where a true childhood was a luxury that didn't exist. Back there, surviving meant you had to fight every single day just to make it through. The fights weren't for sport. They were necessary, they were violent, and he fought as if his life depended on it. Because oftentimes it really did. But then a capricious twist of fate handed him an unexpected weapon dance. Cagney trained as a professional dancer, and that changed absolutely everything. He didn't abandon his fighting instinct, instead he honed it, making it more exact, more precise, and infinitely more dangerous. His movements, whether in the ring or in front of the camera, were pure lethal choreography. When he threw a punch in a scene, it wasn't acting, it was muscle memory. Every single blow had a clear direction, and every gesture carried a specific, calculated rhythm. He was a boxer with the precision of a dancer, or perhaps a dancer with the raw fury of a street fighter. Director Raoul Walsh summed it up perfectly. Cagney knew how to throw a punch better than any actor I ever met because he had thrown them for real, and you could tell. His energy was contained, electric, and completely unpredictable. He could smile at you like a friend and a second later explode like a weapon, but it wasn't chaos, it was absolute control. A coordination born from pain. Offset, he didn't need to prove a thing. He was quiet, respectful, even gentlemanly, but nobody in their right mind ever dared to provoke him. As Bob Hope said once, Cagney was the kind of guy who would knock you down with a punch and then pick you up and buy you a drink. He never used his size as an excuse. He never raised his voice just to get noticed. Because when you have lived among blows, broken streets, and real hunger, you don't need to fake toughness. You already carry it inside. And that is why when James Cagney appeared on screen, you didn't see an actor playing a gangster. You saw a man who had already been one. On the big screen, Charlton Heston parted the seas, freed slaves, and commanded entire armies. But off the set, Charlton Heston didn't have God on his side. He had only his wounded body and an indomitable will to keep him going. Before holding the tablets of the Ten Commandments, he held a machine gun as an aerial gunner during the Second World War. He served in the skies over the Pacific not as a symbol, but as a man surrounded by bullets, noise, and real fear. He learned the discipline, the endurance, and the silence of the men who didn't come back. When the war ended, Hollywood turned him into a myth. His physique looked as if it had been sculpted by Michelangelo himself. But what nobody saw was the pain he carried every single day. During a scene in The Greatest Story Ever Told, he actually tore the ligaments in his shoulder. They offered to stop the shoot immediately. His answer was simple. "Wrap it in tape, I have a cross to carry." And he kept filming that very same afternoon. But Heston's greatest battle wasn't fought on a set or in the sky. It was within his own body. Years after filming The Conqueror, a movie shot just a few kilometers from a nuclear testing site, the diagnoses started rolling in. Of the 220 crew members, almost half developed cancer. Heston also had a lung removed. His breathing became sheer torture. Every line of dialogue was a titanic effort. Did he retire? No. He kept working. He kept fighting. He remained Charlton Heston. During Ben-Hur, he refused to use doubles for the brutal chariot scenes. Every bump, every jolt was real. He knew the audience would see everything, and if the price was pain, he was willing to pay it. Modern actors ask for doubles, air conditioning, and slow motion. Heston asked for only one thing: let me do it myself. Because when he played Moses or Judah Ben-Hur or any legendary figure, he didn't do it from fantasy, he did it from sacrifice. Every step he took was a victory against illness, against wear and tear, against death itself. Charlton Heston didn't need miracles. He himself was the miracle, a warrior disguised as a prophet, a man who was bleeding on the inside but never allowed it to show on screen. And that is why even today his shadow looms larger than many who came after. John Wayne on the screen was the definitive image of the cowboy, upright, silent, with a gaze that said more than 1,000 words ever could. But John Wayne, he wasn't just some hollow symbol. He didn't need to look tough. He actually was tough, and he proved it time and time again. His story kicked off in the harsh, gritty reality of 20th century rural America. He worked hauling furniture, moving heavy sets, doing all the grunt work that nobody else wanted to touch. He didn't make it to Hollywood because of connections or some charming charisma. He got there through sheer, unadulterated brute force. His body could take a beating like a brick wall. During the filming of Ty of the Alamo, he took a nasty fall off a horse and actually broke several ribs. Rest not a chance. He taped up his torso, popped some painkillers, and kept right on filming. The pain was never an excuse, but his biggest battle was fought in total silence. In 1964, doctors had to remove an entire lung and 4 ribs after a devastating cancer diagnosis. Anyone else would have called it quits right then, but John Wayne, he wasn't just anyone. He was back at work just months later riding horses and filming intense shootouts without showing a shred of weakness. And what came next was even worse. During the filming of The Conqueror out in the Utah desert, the entire crew was exposed to dangerous radiation from nuclear testing sites. More than 90 people eventually developed cancer, and that included Wayne himself. He got it too, and although that's probably what killed him years later, he never once complained, and he never used it as an excuse. When a director offered him a stunt double for a risky scene right after his surgery, Wayne just glared at him. Either I do my own scenes, or you hire someone else. That wasn't just dialogue from a script. That was exactly how he lived his life. Even his political rivals respected him for one thing, his physical courage. Kirk Douglas, who didn't agree with him on anything, made it crystal clear. I don't agree with what he thinks, but I saw things he endured that would have sent anyone else straight to the hospital. Steve McQueen. In a Hollywood full of fake lights and fancy designer suits, Steve McQueen showed up covered in dust gasoline and real jagged scars. He didn't need to act like a rebel, he really was one. He had been abandoned by his parents early on. He grew up surrounded by abused, broken homes and reform schools that tried to tame him without success. By 14, he was already living out on the streets. At 17, he enlisted in the Marines looking for discipline, or maybe a war he could understand better than love. He was arrested, he was beaten. He spent 41 days in the military brig not out of weakness, but because he refused to obey orders without questioning them first. But one day the chaos gave him a chance to redeem himself. During an Arctic training exercise, an armored vehicle plunged into the water. McQueen jumped in without a second thought and saved 5 comrades from drowning. The rebel kid had proven he had something more than just guts. He had the instinct of a leader. When he finally made it to Hollywood, he didn't leave the danger behind. He turned it into his trademark. Every dangerous scene was his to do, every explosion, every impossible jump, and every car crash too. During The Great Escape, he tried to do even that motorcycle jump that the producers literally forbade him from attempting. In The Sand Pebbles, he almost drowned for real. In The Towering Inferno, he insisted on walking right into the flames, not out of ego, but because he wanted it to look real. The insurance companies were trembling. Directors were begging him to stop, but he simply smiled and hit the gas. And when he wasn't filming, he was racing professionally under fake names on deadly tracks. One time, he even competed with a cast on his foot and still managed to finish in second place. He was faster with a broken leg than most drivers with 2 healthy ones. But behind the leather, the dark sunglasses, and the cold attitude, there was something else there. When he found out his name was on Charles Manson's hit list, he didn't hire bodyguards. He just started carrying a loaded Magnum revolver with him all the time. At home, on the set, at parties, it wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. His stunt double barely had any work to do. Steve used to say he was better than most of the professionals. Because McQueen wasn't pretending to be fearless, he was addicted to the risk, a man who lived every single day like the next one might never come. He died young. At barely 50 years old, he lost his final race against cancer, but right up until the very end, he stayed true to himself. No makeup, no speeches, and absolutely no fear. Charles Bronson. Before the vigilante roles, before all the bullets on screen, Charles Bronson already knew what darkness was. And not the darkness of a poorly lit movie set, but the darkness of the coal mines where he worked at just 10 years old. Hundreds of meters underground, breathing in black dust and breaking his body for pennies. He was the 11th of 15 children born into absolute misery in Pennsylvania. Poverty wasn't just a phase for him. It was his daily reality. And that poverty carved him like a rock, no complaining, no crying, just enduring it all. When World War II broke out, he traded the soot for enemy fire. He served as a tail gunner in B-29 bombers facing down aerial shootouts over Japan. He was wounded in combat. They gave him the Purple Heart, and when he came back home, there was no red carpet waiting for him. Just more hard work. He worked as a cook, an onion picker, an occasional boxer, doing absolutely anything that would pay the bills. That is exactly how he arrived in Hollywood. He wasn't looking for fame, he was just looking for a meal. And what he found was a microphone, a camera, and a persona. He didn't have to fake the silent man who can kill you without ever raising his voice. His punches on screen were different. They weren't theatrical, they were precise, fast, and brutal, because they weren't inspired by movies, they were inspired by survival. Jan Michael Vincent, his co-star in The Mechanic, said it without any filters. He just grabbed me by the shirt in one scene and completely knocked the wind out of me. He definitely wasn't acting. After Death Wish rumors started spreading that the Mafia had sent him death threats, his reaction, he just laughed. He said, "I've lived too long, I've seen too much, that doesn't scare me." Charles Bronson didn't play the role of the tough guy. He was the tough guy. He would show up, do his job with surgical precision, and then disappear. No egos, no speeches, just a steely gaze and a very real presence. When he spoke, if he spoke at all, his sentences were like blades. But most of the time he said nothing, and that made him even more terrifying, because the man who doesn't need to scream has probably already made others scream. Charles Bronson didn't need a costume, he didn't need makeup. He was already the character. Any character, all of them, because his real life had been harder, crueler, and more intense than any script. Lee Marvin. Some actors study how to walk like a soldier. Others practice the stare of a killer. But Lee Marvin didn't need classes. He had killed for real, he had bled, and he had survived actual hell. Before a director even pronounced his name, he already carried a scar that never stopped hurting. A machine gun bullet went right through his back during the Battle of Saipan, one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific in World War II. It severed his sciatic nerve. From that day on, he walked with a slight limp, but you would never see it on screen. He hid it not out of pride, but out of habit. He was awarded the Purple Heart, but he didn't talk about that. He wasn't looking for glory because Marvin understood what very few people in Hollywood understood. Real violence isn't epic. It's dirty, it's fast, it's silent, and that is how he acted. While others overacted pain or fear, Marvin just stood still. He watched, he calculated. He knew that truly dangerous men don't scream, they observe. And when they strike, it's final. In The Dirty Dozen Point Blank or The Big Red One, he played soldiers or killers. He was simply being himself, remembering. The technicians on the set noticed that he moved differently from everyone else. He had the economy of movement of someone who had already been there. Someone who knew exactly what to do if a man went down or if bullets were coming from the front. Once while filming in Oregon, he got into a fight with several lumberjacks in a bar. There were more of them and they were strong. He faced them without fear. The next day, he showed up on set with bruises on his face and a calm smile. He didn't even mention what happened. His colleagues respected him. Some even feared him a little. Not because he was aggressive, quite the opposite, but because they knew that if he ever decided to get serious, there wasn't much anyone could do. Lee Marvin never sought to be a star. He never asked for attention. His presence was a silent threat, a reminder that not everyone in Hollywood came from drama schools. Some came from real trenches with blood on their boots and death in their memory. And when he looked at the camera, the silence said it all. Robert Mitchum. There was something in his gaze, half droopy, half defiant, that hypnotized and terrified you at the same time. He didn't seem to be acting. He didn't seem to be trying. And that was the most unsettling part, because behind the tired face was a life marked by dust, jail, and fists. Before making it to the movies, Robert Mitchum was already a legend of the streets. At 16 years old, he was imprisoned on a chain gang in Georgia. His crime vagrancy. His youth was a constant escape. He ran away from home and crossed the United States, jumping freight trains, sleeping under bridges, digging ditches, mining coal, and boxing under fake names for a few bucks. For Mitchum, life was never a drama. It was a literal fight. When they finally discovered him in Hollywood, he didn't try to seem different. He didn't change his accent or his posture or his attitude. He just stuck to being himself, and that was enough, more than enough. On screen, he didn't act. He flowed with naturalness so disturbing that directors didn't direct him. They just turned on the camera and prayed he wouldn't hit anyone. He was arrested for possession of marijuana in 1948, when that meant the end of a career. And what was his actual reaction to all of that? He simply shrugged his shoulders, served his 60 days behind bars, and walked out more famous than he was before. There were no apologies, no tears, and absolutely no public relations spin. He just went straight back to work. A journalist once asked him about his acting technique. Mitchum replied, "I have exactly two styles, with a horse and without a horse." That was him in a nutshell, raw, direct, and just brutally authentic. His co-stars often confessed to feeling uncomfortable around him, not because he was loud, quite the opposite, but because he possessed the eerie calm of someone who had been in real fights and had nothing left to prove. His true power lay in the simple fact that he really didn't care about anything. He didn't fake his toughness, and he didn't just play villains or anti-heroes. He simply stood there watching everything. And that was enough to make everyone believe he could break your soul with a single sentence or even a silence. Robert Mitchum was the one guy Hollywood never managed to control. Here was a man who crossed the country on foot, fought for scraps of food, got arrested, survived it all, and then turned that experience into art without ever trying to please a single soul. He didn't need shiny awards or manufactured scandals. All he needed was a camera and his own raw truth. Then there is the legend Kirk Douglas. If there is one single word that defined Kirk Douglas, it was this: unstoppable. He wasn't born with any advantages, and he certainly didn't have any godfathers in the industry. The only thing he truly possessed was hunger, and I mean that quite literally. Raised in the most brutal poverty as the son of illiterate immigrants, he spent his childhood selling scrap metal just to eat. But there was something inside him that roared. With raw, peeled knuckles and a will as sharp as a razor blade, he fought his way to a wrestling scholarship just to get into college. And when World War II broke out, he didn't hesitate for a single second. He went straight to enlist in the Navy. He served on dangerous missions aboard submarine chasers. He was wounded and eventually discharged, but he never complained about it. He never did. Upon his return, he carved his path in Hollywood through sheer force. He didn't act with technique, he acted with pure fury. In the movie Spartacus, he trained with legitimate fighters, refused to use stunt doubles, and took real physical hits in every single take. A bad fall on the set left him nearly immobile for days. Yet by the very next second, he was filming again. The industry had no choice but to respect him. Directors actually feared him because he accepted no excuses, no breaks, and absolutely no "it cannot be done." When something had to be done, he simply did it. He was in a helicopter at 72 years old when Kirk survived a crash that killed two other people. His body was destroyed, his spine battered. The doctors thought he would never walk again. He didn't just walk, he went back to the set. And just when it seemed life couldn't hit him any harder, he suffered a massive stroke. He lost his speech. His voice, his most powerful weapon, was suddenly silenced. Many people would have just disappeared or given up right then and there. But Douglas did not. He learned to speak all over again, letter by letter, through pain after pain. And with the same determination he used fighting Romans on screen, he wrote a book telling his story. Because if there was one thing Kirk Douglas knew how to do, it was to fight against absolutely everything. Stanley Kubrick, who wasn't exactly known for giving compliments, summed it up in one phrase. When Kirk said something was going to happen, it happened. Not because he was the strongest or the tallest, but because he possessed something Hollywood cannot manufacture: will. The kind of will that doesn't break, the kind that lifts you up when everything hurts, the kind that doesn't just act but lives. Ernest Borgnine had a face that looked like it was sculpted out of wet cement. He had a laugh as scratchy as sandpaper, and a personal history that smelled of gunpowder engine oil and dried blood. Before he ever stepped onto a movie set, Ernest Borgnine had already walked through hell in a military uniform. He was a combat sailor in the United States Navy for over 10 years, spanning the entirety of World War II. He wasn't some elegant officer, he was a blue-collar worker of war. He scrubbed decks, repaired engines, dropped bombs, and survived amidst the roar of cannons. When he returned home, neither fame nor fortune awaited him, only unemployment. He worked as a doorman, a warehouse stocker, and a mechanic, until one day, almost by accident, he discovered that the theater was his new battlefield. But he never left behind the man he had been. He just turned him into a character. He had a truly brutal presence. He didn't need to scream to intimidate you. His look was enough, his heavy walk, his voice like a hammer. In From Here to Eternity, he seemed born for violence. In The Wild Bunch, he moved like an old wolf who had already seen it all. But in Marty, the role that gave him the Oscar, he showed something even more unsettling: the tenderness of a man broken on the inside who never lost his dignity. Unlike the method actors, Borgnine didn't study emotions. He had actually lived them. He knew exactly what fear felt like. He understood exhaustion, profound loss, and the kind of unwavering loyalty that simply never breaks. His fellow cast members could feel it too whenever Borgnine went dead silent. They never knew if he was about to pull you in for a warm hug or completely tear your head off. And this wasn't just some phase of his youth. At 60, 70, and even at 90 years old, he was still out there filming movies and performing his very own physical stunts. He kept refusing stunt doubles and ignoring every ache and pain. Once someone asked him why he wouldn't just retire, he simply replied with that trademark crooked smile of his. Retire from what exactly? From living my life. Ernest Borgnine wasn't just a movie star. He was a force of nature, a massive presence, a living symbol of what happens when a man survives war and decides he is never going to fake a single thing ever again. Because some actors just play at being tough guys. He simply was the real deal. Then there is Tom Hardy. He wasn't always the respected actor we know today. In the beginning, Tom Hardy was nothing but trouble. By the time he was 15, he was already getting into brawls using heavy narcotics and dreaming of becoming a mobster. He got arrested for possessing firearms and spent time cycling through clinics, hospitals, and dark alleyways. And when he finally hit absolute rock bottom, there was nothing left inside him except pure rage and fear. But right there, amidst the darkness and the ruin, he made a choice. Either he would perish, or he would come back as something different. And he did come back not as a star, but as a total beast. For the movie Bronson, he packed on 20 kilos of pure muscle trained with actual criminals, and dove so deep into the psyche of a sociopath that psychologists said, "This is not acting, this is possession." For the film Warrior, he trained exactly like a legitimate MMA fighter. Boxing, jiu-jitsu, grappling, and a strict military diet. He didn't do it to look strong, he did it to actually become strong. The hits you see on the screen are not designed to just look good, they are designed to inflict real damage, and when it came time for The Dark Knight Rises, they offered him stunt doubles for the combat scenes. Hardy looked right through them as if they were invisible. If Bane is going to break Batman, then I am going to break myself first. So he filmed every single scene, every jump, and every collision with his own body. He tore muscles and broke ribs, but he still did not stop. Even off-camera, he didn't live quietly. He was unpredictable, wild, and intense. But he managed to channel that energy. He didn't switch it off. He trained it. He became an ambassador for the fight against addiction, a dedicated martial artist, and a silent protector. One time he actually chased down a thief in the middle of the street on foot, and barefoot, leaping over walls like a wolf on the hunt. When he finally caught him, he pinned him down and waited for the police. Witnesses said it was like watching a wild animal hunting, not out of fury, but out of pure instinct. Tom Hardy doesn't look for sympathy and he doesn't ask for respect. He earns it with sweat, with punches, and with discipline because he knows what it means to be weak, to be an addict, to be hated, and to survive it all. One time he actually chased down a thief right in the middle of the street. He was on foot, barefoot, leaping over walls like a wolf on the hunt. When he finally caught him, he pinned him down and waited for the police to arrive. Witnesses said it was like watching a wild animal hunting not out of fury but out of pure instinct. Tom Hardy doesn't look for sympathy and he doesn't ask for respect. He earns it with sweat, with punches, and with discipline because he knows what it means to be weak, to be an addict, to be hated, and to survive it all. Oh,